So I mostly want to make this video for me to say that today, May 5th, 2020, marks 1 year since I took my Shahada, which means I've been a Muslim now for a whole year. My life has revolved around getting closer to God this last year, and alhamdulillah, it's made a huge difference in how I see life and how I feel about everybody. And it makes me really emotional to talk about, because I couldn't imagine my life without this type of perspective. And I just feel so grateful for everybody that I've met. And just not feeling like I'll ever be alone, because I have this relationship with God now. So. If you know me, you know I don't like to cry.
So a lot of you are asking for my story on why I converted to Islam. Please, no negative comments, and if you have nothing nice to say, don't say it at all, and please be respectful. Neither of my parents really taught me right from wrong. They both struggled with addiction issues, and my grandma raised me for the early beginning of my life. She celebrates Christmas, and that's pretty much all I really knew about religion until I turned 14. My sister took me to a church, and it was a terrible experience. Every question I had wasn't really answered, and if I had a question that you were really kind of supposed to know the answer to, people just stared at me, and I'm running out of time, so like for part 2. My convert story, part 2. So after my experience with the Christian church, I pretty much lost all faith and all curiosity in God and religion. I kind of assumed that they were all the same, and strayed off and did whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. I was living a life of sin, and I had no idea why terrible things kept happening to me over and over. I didn't connect the two, and I would even just little things like running into stuff, dropping stuff all the time. I also battled with depression and suicidal thoughts most of my life. And this next part is going to be really hard for me to share. So, please be supportive and like for part 3. My convert story, part 3. So a year ago, actually yesterday, I went through something very hard, and it was too much for me to handle, so I just decided to try and take my life. I took enough pills to kill a horse, and no one could tell me why I had survived it. While I was in the hospital, I found an English Quran, and picking that book up was the best decision of my life. Despite everything I had heard about Islam and the way my family talked about it, I still wanted to know more. After that, I became more modest. I became more humble. I became a better mother. Bad things stopped happening, and I'm running out of time again. My convert story, part 4. So after I got out of the hospital, I focused a lot of my time learning about Islam. I just wanted to know more. And to this date, there is nothing that I found that I disagree with or don't like. Another thing that I felt was that I was not alone. I could feel God with me, and this gave me conscience. I knew what I did and said and put out into this world mattered, and that it would come back to me. Alhamdulillah, April 23rd, 2020, I performed my Shahada and became a proud Muslim, and it felt like 1,000 pounds had been lifted off of my shoulders. I did lose family, I did lose friends, I have even lost clients, and would I change my decision for that? Never. I am so proud of my decision, and if they can't accept me for who I am, then that's their problem, not mine.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Type story time. Just an FYI, most of the videos I take are one take. How did I become the Muslim? Well, when I was young, I lived in a small town. My family's Catholic. I grew up in a Catholic school. It was a town, all white people. Then I moved to a bigger city and saw that spice. Black, Arab, Indian, and of course, Asian. First Muslim I've met, they were Sudani. And their family treated like me, like family. So that was my first introduction. They were culturally Muslim, but I learned a lot from their brothers. So I always had a faith in God. Eventually though, slowly but surely, I was starting to realize that this is the truth. Like, it didn't stop at Jesus, peace be upon him. And the continuation kept on going with the last and final revelation, with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I had to make a decision. Either accept the truth and be hated amongst my peers and friends and family, or live a life of sin, haram, and lie, most importantly to myself. Part 2 coming. Aywa, story time. Part 2. Yes, I want to clarify. Shit, it's cold. Every man must choose his own path. So we left off. My friend was Sudanese, and his family was the first that introduced me to Islam. It took me a long time. I did a lot of research, a lot of soul searching. And personally, it felt that I was being disingenuous with myself had I continued to be Catholic. And it was all in stages. Like initially, I stopped doing the sign of the cross and started just praying to God and stopped believing that Jesus was Son of God or the Immaculate. And I wouldn't eat pork as much. But still at that time, I was smoking every single day. Hashish! And I was drinking every weekend. And I was still a little kid. But I knew deep down, eventually I had to give this all up. If I were to do it all over again, I probably would have became Muslim earlier, so that I could work on myself earlier. People get twisted. They think you make less mistakes. I've probably sinned more within Islam than before. Part 3 coming. My short story to Islam, part 3. So the last time we left off, I already came to the conclusion that it was the truth. However, my desires and my lifestyle was preventing me on becoming Muslim. My family moved out west, Canada, and I decided to go with them. Actually, I didn't have a choice. And there, throughout the whole trip, I didn't do any drugs. No weed, no drinking, not even smoking. Well, maybe I had like a bogey here or two. Eventually, when we landed, it was in a small hick-ass town where people were amazed that I could speak English fluently. I was really upset because I was city boy. I didn't like this small hick-ass town. Everybody was naive and small-minded. Eventually, though, I hit rock bottom. I missed my friends. I got back into smoking weed and drinking, and I was just super unhappy. My parents got to the point, they were like, we give up on you. We don't care what you do. Just do whatever you want. Yeah, I would have preferred them beating the shit out of me than emotionally destroying me. But yeah, I remember I sincerely made dua that night. And I think that was the first time I cried. Part 4 coming. My short story to Islam, part 4. So we left off at me hitting rock bottom, getting back into drugs, then making sincere prayer one night, and I was crying. And literally, I just prayed for guidance. I prayed for just real change in my life. The morning of, I woke up early. I felt some form of relief, weight off my shoulders, as if my Tawbah was accepted, repentance. I didn't feel good, but I felt content with myself. I had a trip booked back out east. I came back just to visit. I was coughing like crazy when I got off the airplane and hit the downtown because of the pollution, but it smelled like home. Later on, I connected with my friends, my old friends, which some of them turned out to be practicing. And then I went to the masjid, the mosque, and that's where I took my shahada. From there, I gained a lot of knowledge, learned as much as I could. I grabbed so many materials, and within like less than a month's time, I learned how to pray. Then I had to fly back. Part 5 coming. My short story to Islam, part 5. We last left off where I told my parents I took a trip back to my original city where I took my shahada there. A lot of people ask me though, how did your parents react? And surprisingly,
they were okay with it. I heard of many horror stories, people getting kicked out, disowned from the family, force feeding them to eat pork. So I was a little bit reluctant on telling them. But I was like, you know what, I don't want to keep this a secret. And I told them right away. I have no idea why I said this to my dad, but he was like, tell me, okay, what is Islam? And I was like, same thing, you believe in one God, but there's no drinking, no smoking, and you can have more than one wife. And I swear to God, his reaction was, no drinking, no smoking, more than one wife? I like this religion. It worked for me because I turned my life around completely. I went from a disobedient piece of shit to obedient son or loving son. But for my parents, they don't care about religion. They care more about money, education, doctor, lawyer, accountant, like most parents. Part 5.5. My short story to Islam. Part 5.5. We last left off my parents' reaction. Surprisingly, they didn't kick me out or get angry or super upset, and they took it well. When I flew back out east to my original city, I linked up with the Muslim community there. The first time I prayed Jummah, I was there, and I saw how the community was. Very accepting, very diverse, and that's where I took my Shahada. It wasn't like I said my Shahada in front of everybody and then getting hugged by a whole bunch of random men. I just said it when I was there. And there were a couple of brothers helping me throughout the process, and that was it. From there on, I was introduced to the Muslim community, and I received a lot of books. One of the first things I learned how to do was to pray. Surprisingly, that wasn't too hard to do. It was more so praying all of them on time.
I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody.
I converted to Islam when I was 18 and I'm 27 now. Over the years, many people have actually asked me about the religion and converted, and the biggest reason they said that I helped them was being non-judgmental, not judging them for their past and just being totally open and kind.
My conversion story to Islam, part 1. So I converted to Islam 10 years ago on June 16th, 2010 at the age of 15. I come from a Christian background. I was raised by a Christian family, and all my life I went to Catholic schools. I was a very bad kid. I was very lost, got into some trouble, drinking, smoking, all that gangster jahiliyyah stuff. So when I was in grade 10, I was in a relationship. Don't judge me, you know what I'm saying? I was a Muslim. I was in a relationship with a Muslim girl, and she was Arab. My conversion story to Islam, part 2. So as I told you guys, I was in a relationship with an Arab girl in high school at the age of 15. And most high school relationships, some high school sweethearts, talk about the future, wanted to have kids, marriage. So my ass caught feelings around 4 months in the relationship, and I told her that I wanted to marry her. And she said, you can't. I asked her why. She said, because you're not part of my religion. So you know what? I asked her, tell me about your religion. And this is the first time in my life that I was ever exposed to the topic about Islam. And she told me everything she knew about Islam, mashallah. We talked about the 5 pillars. We talked about how Muslims aren't terrorists. We talked about Jesus Christ alayhi salam. And this topic really intrigued me because I was born and raised as a Catholic all my life, believing that Jesus alayhi salam was God. So when I found out in Islam that he's only a prophet, I was like, hold up. And then we started debating, and she started saying things like, well, if Jesus is God, how can he pray to Allah, which is said in the Bible? If Jesus is God, why does he say that the Father is greater than I? My conversion story to Islam, part 3. As I told you guys, me and the girl were talking about Jesus Christ alayhi salam in Islam, and I was very shocked to find out that he was only a prophet in Islam, whereas in Christianity, he is considered the Son of God or God himself. So after debating for several hours, she gave me an English translation of the Quran. And the first story that I read was Surah Maryam. And I was absolutely shocked to find out that in Islam, Muslims believe in Jesus almost exactly the same as Christians do, except that Christians believe that he's God or divine. So after reading Surah Maryam, I was more inspired to read more of the Quran. So I actually ended up reading almost half of the entire Quran. Keep in mind, I was 15 years old. Then I started reading the Bible again. Then I started asking questions such as, why does Jesus pray in the Bible? If he's God himself, why does he need to pray to God? Why does Jesus say that the Father is greater than I, the Father is greater than all? And nowhere in the Bible I found that Jesus says that he's God himself. Nor is the Trinity even mentioned in the Bible. My conversion story to Islam, part 5. So now the research started getting deep because I started asking my own friends these questions that I was having that I couldn't really solve. How is Jesus God if he's praying to God in the Bible? If he's saying that the Father is greater than himself many times? If Jesus is God, why does he have to eat? If Jesus is God, why does he get weak? Surely these are things that God doesn't go through. And every day I would study the Quran and the Bible at lunchtime in high school. And this was about 4 months. Every day I would be reading just to gain knowledge. I started getting made fun of by my friends. I started losing friends. Teachers were making fun of me. Keep in mind, this is a Catholic school where there's about 1,000 Christian students. Then you have me just reading the Quran. And the only person who I had by my side was the girl who I was in a relationship with. Alhamdulillah. Then I started telling my parents that I was interested in becoming Muslim. My mom was okay with it. My dad said, if you become Muslim, you will not be my son. My conversion story to Islam, part 6. So I finally approached my parents, telling them that I was interested in becoming Muslim. My mom wasn't as angry, but she was worried, thinking that I was going to become an extremist or a terrorist. My dad, on the other hand, when I told him he wanted to disown me, he said, you're no longer my son. How could you think about doing something that's such a big disgrace to our family? If you guys don't know, African Christians are super hardcore. And that almost made me reconsider. I was telling myself, maybe I should just convert when I'm a little older after high school. Maybe I'm too young as a 15-year-old to want to change my religion just like that. I literally felt alone because as a kid who was respected in school, started getting ridiculed, I felt alone. And all I had was really this want to become closer to God. Then I started learning about the Prophet ﷺ and his life. My conversion to Islam, part 7. So then I started learning about the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And honestly, when I started learning about the Prophet and his life, I truly got inspired. Because the Prophet ﷺ grew up in struggle. He grew up as an orphan. He grew up in poverty. And I really related to his story, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because I grew up with a very difficult childhood. And I could relate to so many things that the Prophet ﷺ went through. And also what really intrigued me about Islam is that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the only religious historical figure whom you can actually historically prove existed. You cannot historically prove that Isa alayhi salam existed. You cannot historically prove that Musa alayhi salam existed or any of the prophets that are mentioned in the Quran historically. But Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, there is historical proof that a man named Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam existed in the 6th century Arabia. And that created some sort of validation in me. And my inspiration from the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam just couldn't hold me back from converting to Islam.